Hi computer scientists, Mr. Stafford here, and I'll be working on Unit 2, Lesson 2, using variables. The first activity is going to have us declare a variable called initial x of type int and initialize it with a value of 0. So it's of type int, naming it initial x, its value is going to be 0. Step number 2 says declare a variable called initial y of type int and initialize it with the value of 0. So I say int initial y, its value is also 0. Step number 3 says declare a variable called direction of type string. So I say string direction and initialize it with the value of east. Since it's a string, it's got to be in quotation marks, and I say east. And step 4 says declare a variable called paint level of type int, paint level, and initialize it with a value of 5. Step number 5 says declare a variable called dolly of type painter and initialize it with the new painter object. And then we have to use the variables initial x, initial y, direction, and paint level as the arguments for our constructor. So I say painter dolly is equal to new painter. And then I have to use the variables that we created from above, lines 6 through 9, as the parameters. So initial x, initial y, direction, and paint level. When I run this code, it should draw a line using 5 units of paint, but we see that we have an error, and I've missed a semicolon. Maybe you caught that on line 9. I'm going to put in that semicolon. Java, there's my line 9 error semicolon. I put that in, hit run again, and we have our painter drawing that line. I'll go to lesson number 3, bubble number 3, still on lesson 2. It says our program should create 2 painter objects, but currently the painter variable called CSA is initialized to null, and we see that on line 12. So what do you think will happen when you click run? When we run it, I see that it creates an object, painter object at 0, 0, facing east, and the paint level is 100, and that's from line 10, dolly. So what we want to do, step number 1, is create a second painter object that has an initial location of 4, 5, facing east, and has 100 units of paint, and assign that painter object to the existing variable of CSA. So what I need to do is update the values for initial x and initial y. I already have initial x and initial y, and I need to update them so that they are 4 and 5. So I say initial x is going to equal 4, initial y is going to equal 5, and I'm going to use these as the arguments for my constructor to update CSA. So I've already declared the object, now I need to initialize the new painter using variables and assign to CSA. So what I'm going to do is say CSA is going to be equal to a new painter, and I'm going to copy and paste here. I'm using the same variables, but I've updated initial x and initial y, and so when I run this, hopefully I have another painter for CSA right here at 4, 5, facing east, and it has paint 100. The next programming level for this lesson is level 5. And this has me initialize a scanner. So it says let's make our program more interactive by adding user input. So we're going to be adding user input using the console. And what we need to do is declare a variable of type scanner called input and assign it a new scanner object. So scanner, I'm going to name it input equals new scanner. In the parameters we need to do system with a capital S dot in. And this creates our scanner object. It doesn't do anything right now, similar to when you build a painter, right? You will create the painter, but it doesn't move, it doesn't paint unless you specifically tell it to do so. Right now, I've built this scanner object named input, and really it's listening for my keyboard to start typing. And it doesn't show any visual of this, but when you do create it and hit run, it is listening, it is running. Okay? The next thing that it wants me to do is write a message asking the user to enter an X coordinate. So how we print to the console is with capital S for system.out.print, open parentheses, and then quotations. Anything we put into quotations will pop up in our console. So if I ask it to enter X and my semicolon, and then I run this, it will print to the console what I have put in my system.out.print. The next thing that I need to do is get the user's input from the X coordinate and store it in a variable. So the X coordinate is an int. I'm just going to name it X, is equal to. Now the way that I grab it from the user is using my scanner variable. The name of the scanner is input. Similar, if we wanted our painter Dali to move, I would have to say Dali.move. But if I want our input scanner to grab information from the user, I need to say its name first, input, dot, and then the way that we take in int information is we say next int. I'll demo this. I hit run. We see from before it says enter X, and then we can see our cursor blinking. And what is happening is we're stuck on line 13, and the program is waiting for me to enter an X value. Let's enter 3. I hit enter, and the program is now over. On line 13, X is now hanging onto the value of 3 because that's what the user put in. Let's finish up the rest of our tasks. It says write a message asking the user to enter the Y coordinate. I'm going to use some copy and paste. I've already asked the user on line 10 to enter an X, so I'm going to copy that system.out.print. Instead of them entering an X, I want them to enter a Y. Line 18, it tells me to get the user's input for the Y coordinate and store it in a variable. That's similar to what we did on line 13. I'm going to copy that and paste it on line 19. And instead of it being an int X, this is a new variable called int Y. I'm still grabbing an int, so I say input.nextInt. The next task it has me do is write a message asking the user to enter direction. So instead of enter Y, I'm going to say enter direction. And I need to get the user's input for the direction and store it in a variable. Here's where it changes a little bit. With our X and our Y, they were int variables. Since the direction is input as a string, I need to create a string variable. I'm going to name it dir for direction equals input dot, again, input is the name of our scanner listening for a keyboard input. And to grab a string, we say dot next, open and close parentheses, enter semicolon. And now dir is holding on to the direction that the user will input. On line 27, it's asking me to ask the user to enter the amount of paint. So enter paint amount. And line 20 is asking me to store that in a variable. Again, the paint amount, since it's an amount, it's going to be an int. I can't have a half a paint. So I'm going to say int paint is going to be equal to input.next int. Again, I'm looking for an int, so I have to say .next int. And on line 34, I have to initialize a painter object named Dali using the variables that we just created. So it's a painter. Dali is going to be equal to a new painter. And the variable names I need to remember for these arguments, okay, for these actual parameters that I'm going to put into painter. So if I scroll up, I remember that I'm using the variable name x for the x coordinate, y for the y coordinate, dir for the direction, and paint for the amount of paint. So in the painter parameters, in these actual parameters, I'm going to say x, comma y, comma dir, comma paint, end it with a semicolon. And I'm going to run this just to make sure I don't have any errors. Okay, enter x, I'm going to say 3. Enter y is 4. Direction would be north. And enter paint amount would be, let's say 5. Okay, and so I have my painter that just appeared right after I hit enter on that last one. It's at position 3, 4, facing north, and the paint amount is 5. And the next thing that I need to do is close my scanner. It's always best practice at the end of your main method to close your scanner. The name of the scanner again is input dot, and to close it I do input dot close. And that should be it. I'm going to run it one more time just to make sure I don't have any errors on that last line. Enter an x is 3, y is 4, direction let's say south this time, and the paint amount is going to be 5. And that should be it for Unit 2, Lesson 2, using variables.